If you're under the impression the last time China had a civil war was 1949, then allow me to say today that you might be under the wrong impression. Grab a seat if you're standing. Actually, I don't know why you would do that. Brace yourself if you're sitting down, because today let's talk about a war. An internet war, also known as the 227 Revolution. A conflict that has changed the internet landscape forever in the Sino side of the stratosphere. The war that taught billions of netizens all around the country that you and I can set aside our differences when united against a common enemy. After all, the enemy of my enemy is my friend. So let's begin with a person who the whole story will revolve around. Xiao Zhan originally debuted as an idol in 2015. He wasn't high profile by any means, but he did stand out because he was marginally older, and more importantly, not a typical trainee with a professional trainee background. I mean, bro was a graphics designer in his 20s, zero formal idol training, recruited randomly off the streets pretty much, which sounds ridiculous, but I want you to know that that was a breath of fresh air compared to the industry engineered idols with the same act that people were kind of starting to hate. So this rawness made him just a little more relatable and down to earth compared to the others, and that was enough to cultivate him a very loyal following. Let's call them the Xiao Zhan loyalists. Faction number 1. But you see, if you had to pin down a point in time exactly on when Xiao Zhan became mainstream, that'll be 2019, following the release of a drama series he co-starred in with Wang Yibo, another famous idol actor. The show is called Untamed. Now, this one is a little different from your typical love drama series because it's actually adapted from the famous BL novel, as in boy love, which already had a die-hard cult fan base to begin with because it's boy love. Unlike regular fandoms where you get plenty of casual or fake fans, boy love is a different beast. You don't stumble into it by accident. I'm sure everybody who's in it is in it for the love of the game. Plus, accompanied by the fact that Xiao Zhan really was a great actor, perfectly capturing the performance and the chemistry between the two leads while dancing around this forbidden topic. The Untamed then went on to become a show like never before. It was like the godfather of BL. So within months, right, Xiao Zhan went from kind of this niche idol to the hottest male star in China, with luxury brand deals bidding all over his image. That sounded really weird. You get my point though, right? By late 2019, as the show skyrockets in popularity, Xiao Zhan becomes #1 in traffic, sparking a new faction on the rise following its wake, the Couple Brigade. You know, the shippers, the YN readers, the Wattpad enthusiasts, whatever you want to call them, they just had one goal, and that is Wang Yibo and Xiao Zhan is a good couple. This couple is my life, and I'm standing on business defending the couple. So the two factions exist in harmony for a period of time, except the loyalist faction never really liked the other fanbase. I mean, I'll tell you exactly what it is. You see, loyalists are in it for Xiao Zhan, and Xiao Zhan only. They don't really care too much about the coupling stuff, it's more of a parasocial thing. But the CP fans, on the other hand, well, they were in it for the coupling, which means they like the situation that's going on, but if the situation breaks, then you know it's just on to the next. So then from the perspective of the loyalists, you're not exactly a ride or die. You're not one of us. But seeing that we're both fans of Xiao Zhan, let's exist in harmony all for the greater good of boosting traction for our idol. Until one day, everything changed. Now here's the thing, the Untamed was gaining some pretty notable attention, and by early 2020 this stuff was all over the fandoms. Every major fandom website had the couple trending, especially on Weibo where the term 博君一笑, a clever fandom pun based on 博君一笑, which means to make you smile, except the first and final characters is kind of replaced with the two respective names of the celebrities, kind of like Tom Holland, Zendaya, Tom Daya. Anyways, the point is the couple begins to trend under those keywords. So the ship begins to sail, and one notably gifted CP Brigade member was so touched by this beautiful relationship, she vowed on the internet to write the best fanfiction you'll ever see in your goddamn life. So she started to cook, and she poured her heart and soul into creating one of the most peak, the most world-class, the state-of-the-art BL fanfiction anybody's ever seen. So by February 24th, 2020, Xiao Zhui was born. Released onto Archive of Our Own, one of the world's biggest fanfiction websites. Now I don't know why I'm clarifying, but I have not read it. But I will tell you a one-sentence summary of the plot, okay? So, in this fanfiction, Xiao Zhan is a male escort who identifies as a female, where Wang Yibo is a frequent customer, and the rest is up to your imagination. But here's the thing. Because after the fanfiction was released onto the archive, the story was so widely consumed, appreciated by the CP Brigade that even fan art derivatives of this piece of work began to trend on hot searches. Now that, ladies and gentlemen, is a problem for the CP Brigade, because there was an unspoken rule to being in a fandom of that nature in China. If you're in the community, you know it, I know it, everybody knows it, and that is simply the edgier the shit you're into, the less bodies needs to know, right? Because mainstream and alt culture is already kind of like fire and water, they just don't really mix. So shortly after the release, I'm talking within a day. The Xiaozhan loyalist headquarters received consecutive reports, rumors that a piece of diabolical content involving their idol was spreading across the internet. Of course, the loyalists were seething to see this defiling happening in real time, spreading like a plague. So then as the news rippled more and more towards the center of their communication network, hundreds of Xiaozhan loyalist fans mobilized to track down this source of evil, with all signs pointing to one website, AO3. Now, the same day after the release of this content, a skirmish was launched as waves and waves of reports came flooding the fanfiction, temporarily crashing the AO3 servers and putting heavy burdens onto the relevant web pages as readers struggled to log in. Now, to preserve the sacred text, however, the author uploads a backup into another app, Lofter, creating a safe haven where the CP brigades could regroup. And as the siege continues throughout the day onto the AO3 copy, despite loyalists' best efforts, the fanfiction refuses to go down simply because, well, these reports, although burdensome, are nowhere near significant enough for anybody to take action. So the loyalists quickly learnt that unlike a regular troll account that usually goes down after a few reports, if it's a citadel that we're trying to break through, then only a single concentrated mass report campaign will have any chance of success. So then somebody, perhaps the most devoted loyalists of us all, needs to coordinate this attack. Today I am not speaking up for my idol. I'm speaking up for all artists who have suffered as a result. Artists are deeply harmed by malicious fanfictions, but because of their status, they can't even speak out to protect their rights. This malicious fanfiction attack isn't just limited to one artist, and it won't end now. See, General Zambi is a devoted Xiaozhan fan, indoctrinated since the earliest days. Now, Zambi's account activities throughout the past 8 years has been exclusively dedicated towards retweeting and liking Xiaozhan activities. Now, being one of the most senior members in the Xiaozhan loyalists, she was also the first to find out that the most effective strategy to bring down an enemy CP brigadier was through phone and email reporting to the Anti-Pornographic Authorities Department. Now, her tactics was then quickly replicated throughout the battalion, which proved to be extremely effective all the way until late stages of the war. But for now, comes early morning, 12:58, 26th of February. Seeing that the mass reports are somewhat paying off, General Zambi then decides to employ a new tactic, suitable for a siege, as hundreds of group chat platoons was created with a designated squadron leader reporting to a Weibo mobile command center for easy communication. As it turns out, General Zambi discovered that the Chinese Great Firewall system can be used to their advantage, as websites that have servers offshore will automatically get blocked once they reach a certain traffic level. It's all automated. So what Zambi's tactic essentially allows is a carpet bombing reporting format that directs all authentic user traffic to a concentrated area at a coordinated time to wreak havoc and flood the space with millions of activities at once. And with the preparations all set, General Zambi issues the command. So under the relentless reporting assaults by Zambi strike platoons, within a few hours the fanfictions fell, blocked from the AO3 archive. On the other side of the battlefield, sensing a storm coming after the AO3 has been turned into a bloodbath, Lofter, the other major platform, bolsters up their defenses as netizens take effective countermeasures to hide their fanfictions. This one, for example, is a CP fan giving insight onto how some sensitive content can be hidden from the loyalist carpet bombing report radar by deleting a few keyword tags. On top of that, Lofter officially makes a statement same day promising to hold their ground against network assaults. So, with both the combined efforts of the AO3 remnants and the CP brigades defending the copy on Lofter, the fanfiction remain unscathed. But at a very costly victory for Lofter. After all, nobody could stop the review bombs. Getting a taste of victory, on the 27th of February, Xiaozhan loyalists doubles down with their taunts. If anybody insults, vilifies or feminizes Xiaozhan again and dares to post it on the mainstream platforms, affecting his public image, we will still dare to confront them. Only Xiaozhan fans can protect him, with similar posts following suit flaunting their victory. And I mean, fair enough, after all, the loyalists employed such advanced tactics against such a minority of subculture that the decisive victory was almost guaranteed against the CP brigade. All they could do was survive, let alone fight back. So then, why is there still half a video? Well, the answer to that question is because it's not a civil war unless the whole country gets involved. It comes 27th of February, a small quiet voice from a CP brigade calls to the internet screaming for injustice. Now, as it turns out, all this commotion and traffic the loyalists have caused has pretty much made AO3 a hot topic on Weibo. But of course the loyalists had no idea, they were too busy with all this winning. So then a few netizens from other fandoms like anime and web novel subcultures began to fight back on behalf of the original CP brigades. We'll call them the anti-Xiaozhan coalition. Now, they didn't really make that much difference at the time, but they were posting some pretty hard stuff. Check this out. So as word got around to General Zambi, where a group of, rabble, calling their movement the 227 was causing a bit of ruckus here or there, yeah, Zambi and the loyalists believed that this would be no threat. So, ignoring the movement, the loyalist factions begin to carry on a wide-scale attack on AO3 and Lofter, reporting every fanfiction on the platform. Now, perhaps drunk on victory, essentially in the minds of the loyalists, it made no difference what fanbase you hail from. If you aren't with us, you are against us. So then following Zambi's reporting method, along with the group chat mass grief attacks on the midnight of the 27th, exact time remains unclear, a large number of posts on the Lofter platform were finally taken down by the development team out of fear of government crackdowns, because the reports were going directly to the authorities, and many notable writers deleted their accounts and went into hiding because loyalists were attacking their personal social medias. But here's the main event. The report attacks were so effective that AO3's access within China was cut off. Because as it turns out, Zambi's tactics work so well that major network providers such as China Unicom and Telecom have disconnected the entire connection to the overseas AO3 network, leaving essentially all of China's fandom with nothing to consume. And all of a sudden, billions of fandom netizens were left displaced and confused following the downfall of this archive. Then, a topic on Weibo begins to pick up some pretty serious heat. Xiaozhan fans report AO3. Within a couple hours, half the country had pieced together what had happened, who did the attack, and the public was enraged. So by 22 o'clock, approaching midnight, every fandom imaginable within the Chinese internet was banding together to launch a counterattack against the Xiaozhan loyalist faction, because they slaughtered our people and they took our land, and the objective was simple: hit them where it hurts the most, cancel the idol. But this was no easy task, you see, as at that point in time, Xiaozhan loyalist faction have amassed such a huge following thanks to Xiaozhan's soaring popularity based on his performance in the Untamed. So, knowing that they'd have the advantage here, the loyalists escalate the stakes by declaring war on the entire Chinese fandom. Bilibili, Tieba, 2D subcultures, whatever comes their way will be dust in the past. One of the first non-BL fandoms that found themselves involved in the fight was the Qinghui Pavilion, a small traditional clothing hobby group. As loyalists pushed their way in, a fierce keyboard skirmish erupted, polluting the group's ecosystem. The members resisted until the very end, but the group fell quickly. Under the relentless spam attacks, the admins were overwhelmed and ultimately forced to disband. 2,000 netizens perished in this collapse. Now, following the aggressive expansions of the loyalists, another theater of war was opened in the literature subculture, as Asian and African literature bot was under fire because its algorithm unintentionally retweeted a piece of literature that had derogatory undertones against Xiaozhan's nickname. Yeah, it is what it is. So some fans threatened to unfollow the bot, and the bot auto-generates a sarcastic reply saying, well, go ahead. And that was enough to spark an attack. And under tremendous pressure, once again, the development team pulled the plug on the bot, leaving the literature scene screaming for injustice. After all, he was just a bot. On the anti-Xiaozhan coalition side, the 227 movement advances against Xiaozhan's film and sponsors, as waves of negative review bombs drag the Untamed's rating down a few notches, and his other works soon follow. Anti-Xiaozhan commercial campaigns were also sent across every brand sponsor he was under, saying that as long as Xiaozhan remains sponsored by them, they will not purchase a single product ever again. And as both sides get more and more feral in this all-out war, particularly the loyalists, they were beginning to lose track on who their actual enemy was. Now, under this fog of war, the loyalists get desperate, open firing on anybody and everything, until one day they accidentally trigger a community, one that is familiar with the game that is being played. The trash talking, the toxicity, the coordinated trolling. On the 29th of February, one stray loyalist opened fires in a chat room in an MMORPG called The Legend of the Swordsman Online 3, a game released in 2009 and still running till this day. But you see, what makes this game so special isn't the story or the graphics or the fact that it's old and nostalgic. Swordsman Online 3 had a very unique and very well-known reputation of being what many may call the holy land of Chinese online roleplay. Known as one of the best role-playing MMORPGs in Chinese gaming history, Swordsman Online 3 offers everything: weddings, housing, deep dungeon systems, comprehensive in-game economy. The game has such a tight-knit community that even the developers frequently visit the game as players. But that's not what really made them famous, no. What made them famous was that the community is known to do anything just to prove a point. You see, there was this one time back in 2018. The Swordsman Online 3 hired a few singers to promote their event. So the community complained about the overwhelming amount of comments about the singers instead of the actual game. So the fans of the singers responded saying, well, why would we talk about your stupid game? If anything, it's your game freeloading off our idol's popularity. The player base was of course displeased, and then somebody in the player base had the idea. Well, the guy who made the game, Guo Weiwei, he's the closest thing we have to an idol, right? If we make him more popular than your singer, you would have nothing to say. So a makeshift Guo Weiwei fan group was created in 3 hours by the player base, along with a debut song and a catchy slogan as the fans called themselves the Waitamins, as in vitamins, Waitamins, you know. And within days, the player base boosted his popularity so much that he overtook the top idol in China, far surpassing the virality of those singers the game hired. The idol they overtook that day was Cai Xukun. So back to the present. The first shot was fired by a longtime player in the loyalist faction called Xiao Zhan's boyfriend on Channel 8 World Chat. And as the text chats get a little heated, the battlefield then shifts as the exchange escalates to a public voice chat room so they could battle without restrictions. The rest of the Swordsman Online 3 community quickly tuned in, and soon loyalists from Weibo and even non-gamers were piling into the chat. The in-game chat rooms itself had over 40,000 active listeners, excluding streamers and open broadcasts showing the debate live as rounds and rounds of representatives from each side takes the mic. But as the minutes go by, the loyalists could not hold their ground against the player base as one by one starts to tear up in the voice calls. So word gets back to the loyalist community, requesting for reinforcements. But the problem was, in this loyalist faction, there were a few of them who have heard of the reputation that this community has garnished before. So a withdrawal request was immediately issued, urging the loyalists not to engage with this community, as the consequences will be dire, as they could very well be unemployed enough to destabilize Xiao Zhan's throne as the #1 idol. But it's too late. The crusades already began. The player base has already started voting. As one rank after another, Guo Weiwei begins to climb the charts once again in his sleep, eventually reaching the #1 position. Back to the voice channel. The world listens in, as this is the first time the two sides were able to clash directly. People held their breaths to see how it would end. The debate lasted for 1 hour and 30 minutes, until one side finally fired the kill shot.
楼上那个粉丝，你先别哭了，我简单的说两句。是这样子的，因为我是之前有在娱乐圈实习过，然后我所有的朋友都在娱乐圈内。我现在给你讲一下目前圈内的风向，好吗？你不用哭了，你idol马上就糊。
For the first time, people had a tangible, naturally occurred punchline to use against the Xiao Zhan loyalists. It was clear that morale is higher than ever, because while all this was happening on the commercial side of the war, so many people have joined in on the anti-Xiao Zhan coalition that the boycott actually began to take effect, as brands begin replacing posters of Xiao Zhan with other celebrities contracted under them. Estee Lauder, Colgate, Olay, all the big brands were really taking action. Well, as expected really, the people picked up their pitchforks, threatened to switch to their competitors. The brands had no choice but to take action, and under this unrelenting pressure, for the first time since the beginning of the war, the loyalists found themselves backed into a corner as their beloved idol lost deal after deal. The headquarters was a mess, as members discussed what they should do. Some even suggested that maybe
然后我们大家，我建议集体在视频里面磕头，给我们这个国家磕头啊。
But whatever their actions may be, one thing is clear now. The damage is already done, and they were powerless to stop all this from happening. Just when morale is at an all-time low, Zambi does the unthinkable. On the 1st of March, 9:29 AM, the leader of the loyalists, Zambi, surrenders. I apologize to everyone affected by my horrendous remarks. My irrationality has caused a huge negative impact, and I apologize to everyone. I truly didn't anticipate the impact this action would have on the other circles, but seeing the current consequences make me extremely uneasy and frightened. Those who are unintentionally dragged into this really is my fault. Please everyone, criticize me, an attempt to draw fire away from their idol. Let's skip ahead a few lines. I hope my mistakes can serve as a warning to others. We really shouldn't be so ignorant and impulsive. The consequences of doing wrong are truly unbearable. Netizens rejoiced at the surrender of General Zambi, even marking it as a historical moment in the 227. But you see, this did not extinguish the raging fire, as many were still enraged at the displacement of their homes. Once a peaceful community now ceases to exist because of their devious hate campaign. As many loyalists begged for mercy for the public to spare their idols, the anti-Xiaozhan coalition pushed on relentlessly, comment after comment. Xiaozhan, the same day, finally made an official response, but it was too late once again, as by this point, his team had no idea the damages the loyalists have caused, so the response was subpar at best. So the question now, if you've made it this far, is it truly over for the idol? Well, not if the fans had anything to say about it. See, without General Zambi on their side, their coordination seems to be halved, but both the loyalists and the CP brigade could see that if the anti-Xiaozhan coalition continues to gain more ground, then there may not be an idol left for them. Setting aside their differences, the loyalists halt their attacks on the CP content, and from that, a new faction emerges. A new commander takes the wheel, as King GG drafts up a war plan. Prioritize sponsors, protect the comments, lower the hot search ratings first. As for app ratings and dramas, put them aside for now, report them later. Today, if we don't release a Xiaozhan edit, don't rush us, give us adequate time. When the edits are released, remember to protect the comment section, but don't argue, just make sure the top comments are positive. We cannot afford another hot search run. We cannot control it anymore. This is a war of attrition. Everybody to your stations. And war of attrition it was. As the 227 movement spread far and wide, Twitter, Instagram, state media, throughout a 2-month period, over 150 brands were swept up in this tidal wave. As the war rages on, and the casualties start to incur in real life as police gets involved, people lose their jobs, morale for both sides was at an all-time low. Until the 27th of April. Xiao Zhan himself breaks the silence. A public apology for causing trouble for everybody. Please don't hurt the others. Following this apology was his new song, Spotlight. And to others, this seemed more like another one of his campaigns attempting to capture virality to direct traffic into his new song using the situation. But for Xiao Zhan's defense force and the loyalists at its core, this was an opportunity to show the world everything their movement stood for. If they could push his song somehow to the top of the charts, the public would have nothing left to say. He'd reclaim the #1 spot, and from that point onwards, his team will do the rest. He will be uncancelable. So as one hand joins another, together, they launch a final coordinated assault. Soon, a message began to be passed around. Do what you can afford doesn't mean buy 10 or 8 tickets as a token gesture. Do what you can afford means doing your best. If you can buy 100 tickets, grit your teeth and buy 300. And amongst them all, those who contributed the most wore this badge of honor. And so it began. As one after another, loyalists started to pick up enormous amounts of tickets. 100, 300, 1,000 copies is a minimum for those who are employed. Because this is redemption, and through the combined efforts of Little Flying Knights all around the country, by January 2023, Spotlight sold over 54 million digital copies, surpassing Ed Sheeran's Shape of You and the certified classic Despacito. As billions of people watched collectively in real time, a miracle has actually occurred. It's been 2 years since the 227 movement, and Xiao Zhan's career has made a healthy recovery. It was a war of attrition, 2 years of unwavering persistence from the community. Technically, the 227 never really ended, as extremists from both sides are still fighting till this day. But at least an outcome was achieved for both sides. As a war like this never broke out again, we don't talk about that one, and the fandom circle was at peace once again. And the loyalist fanbase, who were once shunned, can finally call themselves Xiao Zhan supporters again, respectfully earned, of course, without too much criticism. A fanbase like this was never replicated again despite many attempts by corporations. And I mean, how could they? After all, there are no fans more devoted than the fans of Xiao Zhan. I'm Jay Gao, and that was the Great Fandom War of China.